I never imagined I'd feel so invisible in my own family. Yet here I am, sitting alone at a dinner table meant for children, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I'm Sophia Simmons, 38 years old, and I work the night shift as a pediatric nurse at Maplewood Children's Hospital. People say I have the patience of a saint, but I think it's just that I'm used to being the quiet one, the steady hand no one really notices, but everyone quietly depends on. At home, I'm the one paying the bills, juggling the kids' schedules, making sure Daniel, my husband, has the emotional support he needs during his rough days. I'm the silent provider who keeps everything running while the world around me barely acknowledges my presence. I still remember last Christmas like it was yesterday. Abigail, my mother-in-law, glanced over at me and Daniel and said sharply, "You two sit at the kids' table. You're not real family yet." There was laughter, nervous, uneasy laughs from others, but the sting of those words settled deep inside me. I tried to brush it off then, telling myself that it was just Abigail being difficult, that maybe she was having a bad day, or just didn't understand me. But the tension has been there, simmering for years beneath polite smiles and forced conversations. The house we live in, the one where my children laugh and play, is legally in my name, a fact I've kept close to my chest. It's my secret power, a silent assurance that I hold more control than I let on. Still, I've never used it, hoping love and time might one day change the way Abigail and the others see me. Every day, I feel like I'm walking on a fragile glass floor, trying not to crack under the weight of unspoken expectations and subtle digs. Abigail and her family have never missed a chance to remind me I'm not truly one of them. They exploit my kindness and generosity, taking advantage of my willingness to help, yet they treat me like a stranger in my own home. Somehow I convince myself to keep going, to believe that if I just try harder, if I just stay quiet and patient enough, things will get better. But in the quiet moments when I'm alone with my thoughts, a flicker of doubt begins to take hold. Something is very wrong, and I can't yet say how or when it might finally come to light. Growing up, I learned early on how to swallow my pride. I remember one Christmas at my parents' house, a memory I try to push away but can never forget. My older brother, Mark, received a shiny new bike I'd dreamed about for months. I, on the other hand, got a pair of worn gloves, the kind you find at the bottom of a winter coat pocket. Mom's eyes always brightened when she talked about Mark, calling him the golden child, the one who would carry the family name with pride. I was left to accept my hand-me-downs and leftover dreams, told it was all tough love, just preparing me for the real world. I told myself that meant nothing personal, that someday I'd prove my worth in a way no one could ignore. But the patterns didn't end with my childhood. When I married Daniel, I stepped directly into Abigail's world, and with it, her cold gaze and cutting remarks. I remember my first holiday dinner with the bells, the air thick with silent judgment. Abigail, with her sharp tongue, criticized my cheap decorations loudly enough for everyone to hear, then laughed as the room echoed with forced chuckles. I felt my face burn with humiliation, swallowing the words that wanted to scream back. I told myself she was just stressed, that I should be grateful for what I had, but those moments piled up, each one a brick in a wall that slowly built between me and the family I wanted so badly to belong to. Their exploitation of my generosity became a quiet epidemic, and I was left feeling smaller and smaller with every interaction. I've made sacrifices that most people wouldn't even notice. Since Daniel lost his job 2 years ago, I've been covering the $3,500 monthly mortgage on our family home alone. On top of that, the utility bills run about $400 every month, and Emily's private tutoring costs $200. I've canceled 2 vacations to Europe that I'd been dreaming about since I was a teenager, all to keep us afloat. I turned down promotions at work that would have required relocating because I couldn't abandon my family while everything was so fragile. Every dollar I make seems to disappear into keeping this family running, yet the gratitude I deserve is nowhere to be found. Instead, Abigail scolds me publicly for overspending, even as she secretly racks up charges on my credit cards for her own shopping sprees. Daniel, gentle and kind, worries about me. He hints that maybe I'm carrying too much, but he's afraid of Abigail. I can see the conflict in his eyes when he asks quietly if it's sustainable. Our daughter Emily senses the tension too, and her quiet hugs and heartfelt smiles are the only things that keep me going sometimes. My brother Mark, though distant, occasionally offers advice over phone calls, reminding me to hold my head high. Still, I keep my secret power close. Our home is in my name, all the legal documents locked away in a safe spot. I've never once used that leverage because I hope, foolishly perhaps, that love will win out. But the parasitic attitude of the in-laws is a constant drain, and I wonder how much longer I can keep this balance. That summer barbecue changed everything. Or maybe it was just the moment I began to see the cracks clearly. The sun was warm, the air filled with laughter and the scent of grilled food, but when Abigail glanced my way, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. She announced loudly, "Sophia, why don't you and Daniel take the kids to the little table? Adults are talking." I blinked, stunned, as I saw the small plastic table set off to the side, away from the circle of grown-ups. Everyone's eyes flicked between us. Some stifled laughter, others looked away. My heart hammered, a mix of shock and something sharper, humiliation. For the first time, I said no. "No, I'm staying here," I said quietly but firmly, standing my ground. Abigail's face tightened. "Don't make a scene. You're not real family yet," she snapped, her words cutting straight to the bone. I swallowed the lump in my throat, blinking back tears I refused to let fall. I told myself she must have been stressed, that this wasn't really happening, but deep inside, I felt my world shift. After everyone left, I retreated to the guest bedroom, sitting alone with my thoughts swirling like a storm. That moment, small as it was, felt like a quiet rebellion, a seed of doubt planted in my heart about what this family really thought of me, and if I'd ever truly belong. It was the start of something, even if I didn't know it yet. After I stood my ground that day, I thought maybe Abigail would back off, but instead, her retaliation was swift and ruthless. I began to notice subtle changes, the way family members, even those I once considered neutral, started treating me differently. Whispers floated through the air at gatherings, too soft to catch entirely, but sharp enough to pierce my heart. Abigail had been spinning stories behind my back, painting me as too sensitive and desperate to force my way into a family that's never truly welcomed me. Karen, Abigail's sister-in-law, cornered me once at the grocery store, her voice low and patronizing. "Sophia, honey, you need to stop making waves. Everyone's just trying to keep peace. Maybe it's time you accept your place." Her words felt like a slap, the kind that lingers long after the impact. I wanted to argue, to say I wasn't the one stirring trouble, but the look in her eyes told me it wasn't worth it. They'd already decided my role, as the problem who couldn't be satisfied. One evening, I got a call from Abigail. Her voice was honeyed, but the words dripped with venom. "Sophia, you're imagining things. You've always been too emotional. Maybe you should calm down before you say things you don't mean." I clutched the phone tightly, my knuckles whitening. How could she twist everything to make me doubt myself? My stomach churned, and I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, the cold dread of being gaslit by someone who should have been family. At the next family brunch, Abigail orchestrated a public spectacle. She smiled sweetly as she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Sophia, dear, how much have you really contributed around here lately? It must be exhausting, trying to control everything." The room shifted uncomfortably. I saw Daniel opening his mouth to defend me, but Abigail's charm swept the room, drowning out his words. The laughter that followed was hollow, and though my cheeks burned with humiliation, I forced myself to remain calm. Inside, a storm was brewing. Was I really the problem? Or was I just the only one fighting to be seen? The pressure intensified. Family members who once offered small kindnesses began to avoid me. Friends subtly distanced themselves, as though Abigail's whispers had woven a cage around me. Even at work, I felt the shift. Colleagues asking pointed questions about my family life, or looking at me with veiled pity. The isolation was suffocating, but I clenched my jaw and refused to let it break me completely. Abigail's flying monkeys had mobilized, but I knew I had to find a way through the storm, even if I had to face it alone. I couldn't let it spiral further. I arranged a meeting at a quiet coffee shop, hoping a calm conversation might clear the air. Daniel and Abigail agreed to come, and I prepared myself to speak with honesty and openness. "I've been supporting the mortgage and bills for years," I began, my voice steady despite the nerves twisting inside me. "I want us all to feel respected and valued. This family, our family." I laid out the facts, careful to avoid blame, hoping to find common ground. But Abigail's response shattered the fragile peace I sought. She wiped away what looked like tears, but I recognized the practiced victim act. "Sophia, you don't understand how hard this is for me," she said, voice trembling with false sorrow. "I've sacrificed so much for this family." Then, with a venomous edge, she warned Daniel about my controlling nature, planting seeds of doubt. The air thickened with tension. Aunt Helen, who was supposed to be a neutral mediator, sided with Abigail, invoking family tradition and respect for elders as if they were laws carved in stone. I felt the weight of dismissal pressing down on me. I left that meeting feeling crushed, but determined to keep my dignity. The attempt to resolve things peacefully had failed spectacularly. Abigail's manipulation was a fortress I couldn't breach with kindness or reason. The isolation deepened, but so did my resolve. I was no longer naive enough to believe goodwill alone could change her. I was a wronged woman, standing on the edge of a fight not born of malice but necessity. The path forward was unclear, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep bending so far without breaking. The next blow came when Abigail shattered the fragile veneer of civility in the most public and humiliating way possible. Emily's school award ceremony was supposed to be a proud day, a celebration of our daughter's hard work surrounded by family and friends. Instead, it became a battlefield. As Emily stood shyly on stage, Abigail made a pointed comment loud enough for the crowd, including Daniel's colleagues and Emily's teachers, to hear. "It's amazing how Sophia keeps the house afloat all by herself, especially with Daniel out of work for so long." The words landed like a slap across my face, reverberating in the hushed murmurs that followed. Faces I recognized, neighbors, co-workers, even some of the school staff, turned toward me with varying degrees of judgment and pity. Emily's gaze dropped to the floor, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. I felt the sting of betrayal deepen. This wasn't a careless slip. It was a calculated attack, weaponizing the private struggles I'd tried so hard to shield. Daniel tried to intervene, but Abigail was louder, more forceful. "It's about family loyalty," she declared, her voice ringing with false righteousness. "We all deserve honesty." No one stepped forward to challenge her, and I was left standing amid the ruin of my reputation. The humiliation went beyond words. It threatened to undo the fragile respect I'd fought for at work and in the community. The betrayal cut deeper than I could express, and the realization hit me like a tidal wave. Abigail wasn't just an emotional parasite. She was actively destroying the life I'd worked so hard to build. That night, the house was heavy with silence. Emily curled up beside me, whispering, "Mommy, are we okay?" Her small voice broke something inside me. I pulled her close, fighting back tears. I had to be strong, not just for her, but for myself. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness from Abigail. It was deliberate, a move born of cruelty and control. And it was clear to me now that I had to prepare for whatever came next. I couldn't let this break me. Despite everything, I tried one last time to bridge the widening chasm. We sat down for a quiet dinner at home, the air thick with unspoken tension. I looked Abigail in the eye and spoke gently, my voice steady, but filled with hope. "I need you to respect me and our family," I said. "I'm willing to forgive past hurts if we can move forward." For a moment, I thought she might surprise me. She smiled sweetly, the kind of smile that's too polished to be genuine. Then came the cold ultimatum. "You'll never be real family until you stop controlling my son and bending over backwards for us." The words hit me like ice water. I felt my heart squeeze painfully as I gathered the courage to speak my truth. "I need honesty and appreciation. That's all." But Abigail dismissed me with a look that chilled me to the bone. Without another word, she stood and walked away, the door clicking shut behind her like a verdict. I sat there, stunned and vulnerable, the weight of rejection pressing heavily on my chest. I had laid everything bare, my needs, my hopes for peace, and she had turned me away without a second thought. That door closing was more than just a physical barrier. It marked the end of any illusion I had left about goodwill between us. I realized then, with a quiet, shattering clarity, that I had done everything I could. There was no goodwill left to salvage. The battlefield had been set, and I was standing alone, ready for whatever came next. After that dinner, the coldness in the air didn't just linger, thickened around me like a heavy fog. Abigail wasted no time exploiting my most vulnerable moments. Word spread through the family like wildfire, not the kind sparked by concern, but the sort that scorches and isolates. Abigail whispered to Aunt Helen, then to Daniel's cousins, all painting me as manipulative, unstable, a woman whose heart was hidden behind a mask of false smiles and secret agendas. I felt their eyes drift away at gatherings, at holidays, even in casual texts that went unanswered. Each distance felt like a quiet push, a slow erasure of my presence from the family tapestry. Daniel was caught in the middle, his discomfort palpable, but overwhelmed and unsure how to protect me without igniting more conflict. I clung to the few flickers of support, Mark's occasional texts reminding me to stand tall, Lisa's unwavering calls checking in, her voice a lifeline amid the storm. Still, the weight of isolation pressed down hard in the silence of our home. Nights stretched long, filled with the echo of Abigail's barbs and the sting of family members turning their backs. Exhaustion seeped into my bones, and I found myself questioning everything. Maybe I am the problem, I whispered one morning, staring at the reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back seemed fragile, unsure, worn thin by the erosion of trust and warmth that should have been my refuge. But beneath the creeping self-doubt, a quiet ember burned, a simmering resolve anchored in years of sacrifice met with disdain. The memories flooded in, the canceled vacations, the extra shifts, the nights spent comforting Emily through her fears, all while Abigail's judgment gnawed at me like a persistent ache. I felt trapped in a cycle I couldn't escape. But somewhere deep inside, a fragile hope began to form, a future where I might reclaim control, where dignity wasn't a distant dream, but a tangible goal. The tension coiled tighter. I was teetering on the edge of something that would change everything. The loneliness was a cavernous ache, but it was also a crucible. I gripped the edges of my faith in myself, reminding my heart that endurance without surrender was still endurance. The family I had hoped to build with Daniel felt more like a battleground, but I was no longer willing to be the silent casualty. The narrative of my life was shifting, and though the path was uncertain, the first stones of a new foundation were laid. I didn't know yet what form my fight would take, but I knew it wouldn't be quiet forever. The days blurred into a haze of whispered rumors and cold shoulders until the family reunion, the moment everything cracked wide open. Abigail stood in our living room, a smug smile plastered on her face, announcing with a brazen confidence that sent a jolt through me. She and her husband were moving into our home to help with expenses. The word "our" twisted bitterly in my stomach because no one had consulted me. No one had asked what I thought about this invasion of my sanctuary. My breath caught as relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances, some shifting awkwardly in their seats. Daniel looked stunned, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, but no words came. Then Abigail dropped the real bombshell, her voice syrupy but cutting. She had been charging over $25,000 in personal expenses to my credit cards, luxury shopping sprees and bills for things that had nothing to do with our family's needs. The room went cold and silent. I felt my heart slam against my ribs, a wild beat of shock, betrayal, and a raw, hollow ache. Years of hidden theft unveiled in one moment. Daniel's face blanched, eyes wide, unable to defend his mother. For a fleeting second, I searched his gaze for any sign of solidarity, but it was swallowed by disbelief and confusion. The weight of betrayal pressed down like a physical force, crushing the hopeful woman who had tried so hard to belong. The veil lifted, revealing Abigail's exploitation not just as emotional manipulation, but as calculated financial theft. I felt myself slipping into a cold clarity, the shock fading into a chilling stillness. The fracture was complete. What I once tolerated out of love and hope transformed into a fracture so deep it could never be mended. There was no outburst, no scream, just an icy calm settling over my soul as I absorbed the full magnitude of the betrayal. Something inside me cracked, and in that silence, the hopeful Sophia died, replaced by a version ready, willing, and forced to fight back. That night, alone in the quiet of my bedroom, I let the tears come. They weren't just for the money stolen or the trust shattered, but for the years of sacrifices that had been met with disdain, the love I had offered that was twisted into weakness. But as I wept, something fierce began to rise from the depths of my pain, an anger sharp and precise, honed by every slight and betrayal I'd endured. They never saw me as family, I whispered through my tears, the truth cutting deeper than the wounds, only as a source. The grief morphed into a burning clarity, a vow solidifying in the silence. Never again. For the first time, I acknowledged the power I held, quiet and secret until now, the ownership of our home, the mountain of evidence documenting Abigail's lies and theft, the financial and emotional dependence the family had on me. This wasn't just a burden anymore. It was a weapon. The realization sparked a transformation from victim to strategist, from silent sufferer to someone who would no longer be ignored or exploited. My voice, once muffled by fear and hope, was beginning to take shape in the shadows of betrayal. I owed myself this dignity, this fight, not fueled by malice but by justice. The internal awakening was profound, a shifting of my entire worldview. I could no longer afford to be passive, to hope goodwill would win. The time had come to stand, to take control, to expose the truth with calm precision rather than desperate cries. I drew a deep breath, feeling the fire steady inside me, fueling plans I hadn't dared to consider before. I was no longer just a pawn in their game. I was becoming the player. This night marked the birth of a new resolve, tempered in pain but burning with purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but my direction was clear. I would reclaim my dignity and take back what was mine. One evening, I found Daniel in the kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock filling the silence between us. My voice was steady, careful, not pleading, not angry, just clear. "I'm done being invisible," I said, watching his face closely. "Abigail's theft and disrespect end now. It's time to use what's mine, legally and publicly." The words felt heavy but necessary, like stepping onto a battlefield fully armed. Daniel's expression was complicated, torn between his loyalty to his mother and his love for me. He nodded slowly, cautious but supportive. "I'll stand by you," he said quietly, "but be careful. This could change everything." I laid out a broad plan, keeping my tone even, avoiding emotional traps. At the next family gathering, I intend to expose Abigail's financial exploitation and public lies. I have everything documented. My fingers traced the edge of the dining table as I spoke, feeling the weight of each word. I want this to be controlled, calm, no theatrics, no stooping to her level. We'll use the house ownership, the evidence. It's all in my favor. Daniel's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but also a glint of relief, as if finally understanding the depth of my pain and the necessity of action. In that moment, the fragile alliance between us felt real for the first time in months. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was strategizing, reclaiming control over the chaos Abigail had created. I saw the reluctant respect in Daniel's gaze, and that gave me strength. The shift inside me was palpable, from vulnerability to resolve, from silence to voice. I was no longer her victim, but the architect of the coming reckoning. The road ahead would be hard, but I was ready, measured, focused, and prepared to fight for the dignity that had been stolen for far too long. I sat at the kitchen table late into the night, a thick binder open in front of me like a map to this tangled mess I'd been trapped in for years. Every receipt, every bank statement, every whispered excuse from Abigail was now cataloged and laid bare. The mortgage alone, $3,500 a month, was my silent anchor, holding the house steady while she and the rest treated it like their personal playground. Utilities, groceries, Emily's tutoring fees. I had been footing the bill for it all. month after month, without complaint. But then, buried deep in a stack of credit card statements, I found the hidden trail. Nearly $25,000 in charges over 3 years, all linked back to Abigail's secret spending sprees, luxury boutiques, and bizarre personal expenses that had nothing to do with our family. My stomach churned as I read the line items, each one a betrayal branded in ink and numbers. I didn't rush. I needed professional eyes on this. The next day, I met with my lawyer, a woman sharp as a tack and no nonsense. "You have full legal control over the house and access to these accounts, correct?" she asked, her tone matter-of-fact. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Good. That means you can act decisively when the time comes." She encouraged me to keep all records safe, texts, emails, receipts, and said these would be invaluable. So I spent hours compiling every message where Abigail's guilt trips and manipulative lies were laid bare. Even the family's emotional dependence on me, the way they leaned on my stability and financial support without acknowledging it, was documented in my careful notes. The truth was glaring. They needed me more than I needed them. That realization was both sobering and empowering. If I exposed these vulnerabilities publicly, Abigail's carefully built facade would crumble, and justice could finally be served. As I traced these liabilities and emotional weak points, a new clarity settled over me. This wasn't about revenge. It was about balance, about reclaiming what was rightfully mine and protecting Emily's future. I began sketching out pressure points, timing the exposure for maximum impact when key family members would be present, ensuring witnesses to the truth. I pictured the scene in my mind, the calm but undeniable unveiling of facts that would leave no room for denial. This phase of analysis was methodical, deliberate. I forced myself to breathe deeply, reminding my heart to remain steady. This was a war of endurance, not haste. The battlefield was set, and I was no longer the one to be crushed beneath the weight of their lies. In quiet moments, I whispered to myself, "You hold the power now." It was a silent mantra, a lifeline tethering me to my resolve. I wasn't just cataloging numbers and evidence. I was building the framework for something much larger, a reckoning that would reshape the family dynamic forever. The emotions still churned beneath the surface: hurt, anger, exhaustion. But they were now harnessed, channeled into a plan that felt like the first true act of self-respect I'd allowed myself in years. As the night waned, I closed the binder and exhaled, feeling the weight both settle and lift. The time to act was not yet, but the foundation was laid. Control was mine to claim, and I would not let it slip away. Over the next several weeks, I became a master of quiet preparation. Every evening, I updated passwords on bank accounts and credit cards, switching to combinations Abigail couldn't guess. I called the bank discreetly, reporting suspicious charges as possible fraud, careful not to raise alarms that would tip Abigail off. Legal notices were drafted with the help of my lawyer, precise and unyielding, ready to be sent when the moment was right. To the outside world, nothing changed. I smiled at family dinners, nodded at their gossip, and played the part of the composed, supportive wife and mother. Abigail's eyes scanned me, probably searching for weakness, but all I gave her was calm. They didn't suspect that beneath my polite facade, I was a time bomb, ticking steadily toward detonation. I created a secure digital folder, encrypted and backed up, filled with every piece of damning evidence I had. I rehearsed what I would say when everything came to light, rehearsing in front of the mirror until my voice was steady and controlled. Daniel and I had long, hushed conversations about the upcoming confrontation. His support, quiet but unwavering, was the fragile thread keeping me anchored. "I'm with you," he said one night, squeezing my hand. "We'll do this together." I could see the shadow of doubt in his eyes, but also relief that I was no longer cowering. The family remained oblivious, their dismissive chatter and Abigail's usual condescending remarks sliding off my armor like water. This calm was a thin veneer, the deceptive lull before the storm I was meticulously crafting. Every detail was accounted for, every ally silently aligned. The anticipation was suffocating, but it was mine to bear alone, a secret power fueling the coming reckoning. But then, As I did a final sweep through bank statements one sleepless night, my breath caught in my throat. There it was. Irregular withdrawals from my personal account stretching back 5 years. Small at first, pennies and tens, but growing steadily into obscene sums totaling nearly $40,000. My fingers trembled as I scrolled, the pattern undeniable. Abigail had been siphoning money from me quietly for years, using her access during family visits to exploit my trust. The realization slammed into me like a freight train. All those public accusations of my supposed stinginess, her lavish spending sprees while I scrimped and saved, it all made brutal sense now. I remembered every careless word, every smug smile, now tainted with the corrosive sting of betrayal. The shock didn't end there. A week later, Karen Bell, Abigail's sister-in-law, reached out hesitantly, her voice low and conspiratorial. "I found some receipts in Abigail's things. I thought you should see them." In her hands were copies of bills and statements that corroborated my findings, proof that Abigail's theft was not just suspicion, but documented fact. The betrayal was no longer just emotional manipulation. It was outright criminal. Rage bubbled beneath my skin, fierce and raw, but beneath it, a steely resolve took hold. This twisted parasite had fed on my goodwill for too long. Now, with the evidence in hand, I held the moral and legal high ground. The urgency sharpened. There was no turning back. This discovery reframed everything. It wasn't just about reclaiming respect anymore. It was about justice, about stopping the rot at its root. In the quiet of my room, I allowed myself a moment to breathe, to let the wave of emotions wash over me. But I also felt something new. Power. This wasn't weakness anymore. This was a reckoning. Abigail's house of cards was trembling, and I was the force about to bring it crashing down. The secret theft was a final confirmation that I could no longer tolerate the parasite living off my generosity and my pain. Every slight, every stolen dollar, every whispered insult was now a thread I could pull to unravel her carefully maintained control. The stakes had risen, but so had my determination. This was no longer just a battle for dignity. It was a fight for survival. The story I would tell was no longer victimhood. It was justice, cold and deliberate. The very next day, I began the first phase of my plan with calculated precision. I froze the shared bank accounts and immediately revoked Abigail's access to all financial resources. No dramatic confrontation, just quiet actions. Phone calls to the bank, letters sent under my lawyer's name, official notices filed. I wanted to avoid giving Abigail any inkling of panic or suspicion. At home, I drew a clear line in the sand. No more paying her bills, no more tolerating her presence without formal agreements. The shift was subtle, but palpable. The usual flow of money stopped, and the house's atmosphere grew taut with unspoken tension. I watched Abigail's face carefully during family dinners. The first signs of confusion flickered there, masked by forced smiles and clipped words. Her calls and messages increased, desperate attempts to reassert control, but I remained calm, polite, unwavering. Daniel stood quietly by my side, his support a quiet strength I leaned on. "You're doing the right thing," he whispered one evening, his eyes filled with admiration. The slow withdrawal of financial support unsettled Abigail more than I expected. Her carefully cultivated dominance began to crumble, panic creeping beneath her composed exterior. I felt a cold satisfaction in this measured silence, knowing the storm was stirring but not yet unleashed. This phase was about setting the stage, planting seeds of doubt and disruption without giving away the full plan. I maintained my composed exterior, engaging with the family as if nothing had changed, while beneath the surface, the balance of power was tipping. Abigail's desperation was growing, evident in her frantic calls that went unanswered, her attempts to manipulate Daniel now falling on deaf ears. I was in control, not through anger or drama, but through quiet decisiveness. The first moves were made, and the family was beginning to feel the shift. The real reckoning was still ahead, but for the first time, I was no longer the one on the defensive. The playing field had changed. The room was heavy with the clatter of cutlery and half-muted conversations as I rose from my chair, the folder in my hand feeling heavier than its weight. Eyes turned toward me, a mix of curiosity and that usual undercurrent of skepticism I'd grown all too familiar with. I cleared my throat, steady, despite the pounding in my chest. "I've kept quiet for too long about what's been happening behind closed doors," I said, voice calm but unwavering. A silence fell, a tangible shift. I opened the folder with deliberate care, sliding a stack of documents onto the polished wooden table. "These," I said, "are records of every dollar stolen from this family's finances by Abigail." Gasps spread through the room like wildfire. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Cousins exchanged stunned glances. Abigail's face paled, her usual arrogance replaced by trembles I hadn't seen before. She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand, silencing her. "You tried to interrupt me, but this house is legally mine, and so is the truth." I locked eyes with her, the years of silent suffering channeling into a focused blaze. "Your parasitic behavior ends today." Daniel stood beside me, his presence a quiet fortress. I could feel the temperature in the room rise, the shifting energy unmistakable as some relatives began whispering, nodding subtly, their loyalty moving ever so slightly in my direction. Abigail's facade cracked, revealing the vulnerable woman behind the mask. I spoke firmly. "No more lies. No more exploitation. This is the last time I'll tolerate disrespect under this roof." The room was charged with tension and disbelief, yet beneath it all, a pulse of justice rippled through the air. This was my moment, the long-awaited reckoning, and I was fully in command. In the days that followed, the dominoes fell with a quiet inevitability. Abigail's credit cards were canceled, her access to joint accounts revoked, and legal papers began to circulate, tightening around her like an invisible noose. I ignored the barrage of frantic texts and desperate phone calls, their tone oscillating between pleading and veiled threats. Daniel, cautious but resolute, kept his distance from the drama, his loyalty now firmly with me. Some family members wavered in their support for Abigail, their whispered doubts growing louder as they sifted through what they'd heard and seen. Messages of encouragement and sympathy arrived from relatives and friends who had long suspected the truth, but lacked proof. Despite Abigail's frantic attempts at love bombing and promises to change, I remained unmoved, resolute in my boundaries. I no longer belonged to that toxic cycle. The fracture lines in the family's foundation deepened, but a new order was quietly emerging, one where truth and respect were the cornerstones. Justice was serving its price, and I watched with a controlled satisfaction, knowing cruelty was a line I refused to cross. Abigail's desperation only intensified, morphing into sharper tactics that I had anticipated but was prepared to face. Threats of lawsuits, public victimhood posts flooded social media, and emotional blackmail aimed at Daniel and even Emily became her weapon of choice. She tried to rally distant relatives to her side, painting me as the betrayer, the greedy outsider, but I stood firm, shielded by legal counsel and the cold, unassailable evidence I'd gathered. Some family members, who had been silent for so long, finally stepped forward with heartfelt apologies, acknowledging the courage it took to expose the truth. While I accepted some, others remained distant, their wounds too deep or their loyalty too conflicted. Abigail's isolation grew palpable, her credibility unraveling thread by thread. Her confident, parasitic grip slipped away, replaced by a fragile desperation. Each attempt she made to manipulate or intimidate was met with calm, unwavering boundaries that deflated her efforts. The toxic cycle was broken. I was no longer shackled by fear or silence. I stood resolute and unshaken, a testament to the power of truth and dignity. 6 months later, I sit quietly in the peace of my home, a space that finally feels like mine in every sense. Abigail lives separately now, forced to confront the consequences of her actions without the safety net of my resources. Daniel and I have grown closer, our relationship strengthened by the trials we endured together, grounded in honesty and mutual respect. Emily's laughter fills the rooms unburdened by tension, her smile brighter than I've seen in years. I no longer attend the large family gatherings where Abigail's shadow still lingers. Instead, I cherish intimate moments with those who truly value me. The parasitic chapter of my life is closed, sealed by firm boundaries that protect my well-being. The freedom I feel is new and profound, autonomy that I never dared dream of before. Reflecting on this journey, I recognize the pain, but also the growth. I learned that love doesn't mean losing yourself. Looking forward, I carry hope and quiet strength, knowing respect is something earned, not demanded. This new chapter is mine to write, and for the first time, I hold the pen with certainty and peace.